أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى صدق الله العلي العظيم. When we look at the Ahlulbayt and the significance of the Ahlulbayt, we understand that in Hadith al-Thaqalain, our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam explained to us that I am leaving behind with you two weighty things, Kitabullahi wa itrati, that the book of Allah and my Ahlul Bayt. And as long as you hold steadfast to these two, you will never be lost, you will never go astray. When we look at these two weighty things that our Holy Prophet gave us, we understand the significance that when we want to learn about Islam, you can't have one without the other. There's no way you can understand from Islam and learn everything you need from Islam by one source and not from the other. You need to utilize these two together. And they work together to teach us and give us the resources we need to become Muslimin and Mu'mineen. So the question is the question we want to look at today is, how do you learn from and how do you take advantage of and how do you seek out and extract the information from the Ahlul Bayt? Now, the Quran, alhamdulillah, we have with us and we can take some of the benefits from it. And there's two ways in which our scholars have taught us to utilize the Quran and extract benefit and understand from the Quran. We see one example or one process of taking knowledge from the Quran is working with the Quran from Alif to Ya. You start from Surah Fatiha, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, ila akhir, when you get to Surah An-Nas, and you read it from beginning to end, and you look at verse by verse by verse by verse by verse, and you follow it in a chronological order or a sequential order, and you analyze, research, and learn everything there is about each verse, and then the next verse, and then the next verse, and then the next verse. This is known as the sequential reading or the sequential understanding of the information in the Quran. And there's a lot of information that we can gather from this, and there's a lot of information that we can extrapolate, understand, and learn. And as a matter of fact, many of the Mufassirin have written tafsir of Quran and explanations, exegesis of the Quran in this exact format. They begin from the beginning, from Surah Al-Fatiha, and they conclude with Surah An-Nas. And they cover everything in the middle that goes in this process. The other way we take a look at and we learn lessons from the Quran and how we extract knowledge and information from the Quran is known as reading by subject, where you open the Quran and you take all of the verses of Quran on one subject and you read them together and you analyze them together to get a complete picture of the conversation of what Allah is talking about in the Quran. We see this, for example, one of the primary ones or one of the first ones that many ulama have gone through the process of showing us is the verses of Quran pertaining to the creation of Nabi Adam. Now, these verses, some of them are in Surah Baqarah, some in Surah Al Imran, some in Surah Anbiya. They're all in various places. So when we want to study and research this one particular topic, we go through the Quran, extract all of these verses, and look at them together to create one universal picture of the conversation Allah is having around Nabi Adam. Another way we could do is we could take a look at the mercy of Allah and take out all of the verses that pertain to Allah's mercy and analyze and discuss them to get a complete picture, to get a complete understanding of what is the mercy of Allah. Another one that we could do, or we could do this for every subject that exists within the Quran. Shifa'ah, intercession. Take all of the verses throughout the Quran, wherever they may be on this topic of shifa'ah, go through and discuss them and address them. And we would see that this gives us another complete picture and understanding of what the Quran is talking about and what are the lessons we can learn from the Quran. So we see the two processes. One is the chronological or sequential order of reading the Quran and extracting its meaning and learning from it. And the other is by subject, looking at the Quran and extracting material throughout the Quran by subject, sitting there, analyzing it and discussing it and learning from it. Both are accurate, both are valid, and both are necessary. We need to be performing both of these. The same way, for example, when you and I talk about our relationship with the Quran, we should be certain that that doesn't mean I can only read the Quran one way at one time and that's the only thing I have the capacity for and that's the only way it should be done. No. Rather, when we talk about building a relationship with the Quran, we should be looking at the Quran with many different lenses simultaneously so we can extract many different pieces of benefit. Sometimes focusing and delving into maybe one unique surah, while at the same time reading in chronological order the whole Quran, while at the same time maybe looking at and researching one particular topic to understand the communications of Allah pertaining to a particular subject. Now, this is half of the thaqalain. This is half of the two weighty objects. The other half is the Ahlulbayt. How do we look at and understand the lessons taught to us by the Ahlulbayt? In similar fashion, we see that there is a chronological history that's included within the Ahlul Bayt. That you start, for example, from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You read his life story and all of his lessons that he taught. Then you go to Amir al-Mu'mineen and you take a look at all of the lessons he taught, his history, as well as the hadith and commentary that he made in his life. Then you go on to Sayyidah Zahra, you reach the Imam of our time, Hujjat ibn al-Hasan, Sahib al-Asr wa zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. And this would be a chronological discussion of the events that occurred in the life of one Imam, and then the next Imam, and then the next Imam. And definitely we'll extract lessons, we'll extract learnings, we'll learn things, we'll understand various points that they presented to us and showed to us and demonstrated to us in their lifetimes. However, there exists another way of understanding and learning that is necessary for us to take a look at, and that's looking at the Ahlul Bayt by subject as well too. Extracting their conversations pertaining to one particular topic, collecting them in one place, and researching them to learn and understand the depth of teaching that they're giving us from one to the next. And we see that if we don't utilize this tool of looking at the subject by subject teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, we may miss certain lessons and we may not understand the significance and the importance of some of the lessons that they are trying to teach us. We'll go through two examples to get a better understanding of what this means. In the first example, we take a look at the life of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha. And we see that after the shahadat of her father Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sayyidah goes and demands her right for the property of Fadak. And she goes through and she is insistent to the extent where we see the khutbah of Sayyidah Zahra is on the right of her property and her property being returned to her. And we see that she makes a strong case and presents and shows that this is one of the fundamental necessities for her to have her property returned to her. Next, let's take a look at the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. That after the shahadat of Sayyidah Zahra, we don't see the mention of Fadak anymore. We don't see Amir al-Mu'mineen over the next course of 30 years fighting for Fadak anymore. Now, in this example, we would see that why not? Was Fadak no longer significant? Was it no longer her right that was usurped? Why would suddenly the conversation around Fadak end? And this is where, if we take a look at the discussion by subject, we would find an interesting analysis. We would see that the reason Sayyidah stresses the property of Fadak is not for Fadak within itself. Let's take a look at a discussion that happens between Ibn Abi Hadid, who is the author of Sharh ibn Nahj al-Balagha, and his teacher. Ibn Abi Hadid narrates, he says, one day I was sitting with my teacher and I asked him, I said, if Sayyidah Zahra wanted the garden of Fadak, it's just a piece of land. Why didn't they just give her Fadak and end the conversation? Why make it such a big deal that it would be something that people would use to contest their authority over the garden of Fadak? It was the daughter of the Holy Prophet and they should have just given her the property and gotten it over with. Why wouldn't they do this? The teacher replies to his student and he explains to him, and it's a lesson for all of us. He says, you didn't understand the situation. If they gave her Fadak today, tomorrow they would have come back and demanded the Khilafat for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Fadak itself was not the goal. Fadak itself was not the sticking point. Rather, it was the Khilafat of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib that was the necessity that was wanted. And Fadak was the course by which they would attain it. So the teacher explains, cut off the path before you get to the problem. If they would have given Sayyidah Zahra Fadak, and her demands would have been met, she would have said, the same way you acknowledge that my father gave me this property and it was mine, you have to acknowledge that my father gave Ali ibn Abi Talib the Khilafat after him, and you have to give him his right. So we see, when we take a look at this conversation about the Garden of Fadak, and we take a look at the history of the Ahlulbayt between Sayyidah Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen, Fadak itself was not the goal. Rather, it was one of the points in the discussion of trying to return back the right of Khilafat to the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam. When we look at this, we see that Sayyidah Zahra, through the approach and utilization of Fadak, is the first one to fight for and demand the authority of the Khilafah to be returned to the Ahlul Bayt. She is the first one to establish that we are the supporters of the Ahlul Bayt, and the Imamat needs to be returned to its rightful owners. This is the approach of when we take a look at history, instead of only in a chronological order, but rather by subject, we start to understand a certain depth to the actions of the Ahlul Bayt. Let's look at another example. When Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam sits with his companion Safwan al-Jammal. Safwan had a business of renting camels. And he was one of the close adherents of our sixth Imam. And one day when he comes to sit with our sixth Imam says to him, "Oh Safwan, everything from you is exactly as we would like it except one thing." Safwan becomes very nervous. He says, "Ya ibna Rasulullah, what action do I commit or have I committed that is displeasing to you?" Imam Sadiq says, "You rent your camels to Harun, the usurper of the Khilafat. And this is not a good thing for you to do." Safwan says, "But Ya ibna Rasulullah, one, I don't rent him my camels for worldly affairs. I only rent him my camels so that he can go to Hajj. And two, Ya ibna Rasulullah, I never go and I do the work for him myself. Rather, I have employees that go and do the work and take him and they bring him back and they take care of the whole responsibility. I'm never involved." Imam Sadiq turns to him and says, "Oh Safwan, tell me something though. When this Khalifa takes your camels and he leaves the city of Medina and he goes for Hajj, is there no part of you that hopes that your property would be returned to you? That in some way that this Khalifa comes back and gives you your property and pays you the rent for the material that he used?" Safwan says, "Yes, it's very true." He says, "In this way, if you have hopes for the success and survival of the usurper, you are a supporter of the usurper." Imam Sadiq teaches the lesson that if there is someone who is an illegitimate usurper of our authority, your keeping hope in his survival even is supporting him and is inappropriate for you to do. It's a very clear lesson. But now look in chronological order the history of the Ahlul Bayt. Look at the example of our eighth Imam, Ali ibn Musa al-Rida. And you see that this Imam of ours becomes the Naib of the Khalifa, the successor to the usurper, becomes a figure in the government of the usurper. His name is written on the coins of the time of the usurper. Now, if we only looked at history in a chronological order, we would see a very big disconnect. Where this Imam is teaching us have nothing to do with the government, this Imam is actively becoming a part of the government. You see? And that's why when we take these out, we have to look at these ahadith and these statements in history as a collective. That when we look at the statements around the government and dealing with the government, we look at all of these statements collectively to understand what it is that our position should be with the government. The Ahlul Bayt are teaching us the intricacies of all of these different points when we look at the collective of the various experiences between them. So this is what we would see if we were to look at it collectively. We would see that our Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is teaching us that in the case that you have the freedom and the choice to work with the government, don't work with the government. When you have the usurper, don't work with the usurper. When you have the opportunity and the freedom to select who you do business with, and there is no problem with you either doing or not doing business with someone who usurps our authority, don't do business with them. And then we take a look at the example of Imam Rada alayhi salam, who teaches us that if your life should be threatened for avoiding and trying to stay away from the usurpers, protect your life and work with the usurpers. We take a look in that instance that Imam Rada, when he tries to stay away from the government and tries to stay away from these positions of politics, he is forced to the extent that if you do not listen to us and follow with us and work with us, we will not let you survive. So Imam Rada teaches the lesson that when it comes to dealing with the usurpers, if they threaten your life, if your life is in danger, it's okay for you to work with them because you have to, but to the most minimal aspect available. Now again, let's look at the same topic of dealing with government, and you'll see another example in Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. When he is in the position of authority after the shahadat of his father Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he is now the Khalifa of the time, and Muawiyah comes and attempts to usurp the authority, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam gives the authority to Muawiyah in the conditional treaty that he establishes with Muawiyah. And we see that the people of the time of Imam Hassan alayhi salam didn't understand the actions of our Imam. And they used to actually try to attack him and insult him in the streets and say, "Salam to you, the one who is the disgrace of the mu'mineen." And Imam Hassan would reply to them, "I am not the disgrace of the mu'mineen, but rather I am the one who saved the mu'mineen. I saw within you people the inability to support the religion of Allah, so I made peace with Muawiyah so that you could live and survive through this time. If I had not done this action, you would have all been wiped off of the face of this earth, and all of the mu'mineen would have been wiped out because of your inability to overcome the enemies of Islam." So Imam Hassan is teaching, when it comes to the saving of Islam, it is okay for you to sacrifice and give away if it protects Islam. He's showing you that while it was my authority and my right, I gave away my right to protect the religion of Islam. Meaning, now take a look, we have the different levels being explained to us. When you have freedom of choice, avoid the government. When you are forced into a situation that your life is in danger, work with the government. When you are forced into a situation where the faith of Islam is in danger, give up your right for authority. Then we take a look at the example of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Aba Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam, who teaches us the example and demonstrates to us that when the religion of Islam is in danger, you sacrifice your life, but you don't give in to the oppressive government. In the condition of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain, it's not the question of the life of Abu Abdullah, it's the question of the faith of Islam. That if at that instance he had not stood up to defend the religion of Islam and his right, Islam would have been lost in history and would have been destroyed and distorted. In that instance, when it comes to the protection of Islam, you can't change what you think about the government, but rather you have to fight them and you have to demonstrate and stand up for Islam, that Islam should not be damaged. Islam should be protected. Our lives can be given up, but Islam should remain. Through these four examples, we see how the intricate and detailed image is given to us about what our relationship with Islam should be and governance. How we should deal with governance in the various phases until we see the epitome of the highest example of demonstrating to us the position of Islam. That for the sake of Islam, you give everything. For the sake of Islam, you stay thirsty for 3 days. For the sake of Islam, you sacrifice all of your friends who were to you the best of friends. Abu Abdullah says, I have companions that even my father Ali ibn Abi Talib did not have. I have companions that my brother Hassan did not have. I have the most loyal companions who on the night of Ashura come to Aba Abdullah and they say, Ya Aba Abdullah, if we were to be cut into 1,000 pieces and come back to life, we would come back to life 1,000 times, Aba Abdullah, if it meant the protection of your life. That to protect Islam, give up even such companions. For the sake of Islam, give up even your beautiful children like Aun and Muhammad. Give up your children like Qasim. Give up your children like Ali and Al-Akbar. The description of Ali and Al-Akbar when he enters the battlefield, where Aba Abdullah is following, Mahlan, Mahlan, Ya Akbar. Turn your face to me so that I can see you as you go to the battlefield. Oh Ali, you are the light of my eyes. How is a father to send such a son as you into the battlefield? But when it comes for the sake of Islam, you sacrifice even children like Akbar. When it comes to the sake of Islam, you sacrifice brothers like Abbas. When it comes to the sake of Islam, you sacrifice even your infants like Asghar. When it comes to Islam, you lay down your life and you protect the religion of Islam that none should ever harm it. But we see that most difficult point that Aba Abdullah demonstrates the sacrifices for the sake of Islam, that for the sake of Islam, you sacrifice the sanctity of the respect of your women. You go and you fight to the extent that even if it means that your women will be given in the most degrading situations, that they will go through the markets of the streets of the cities without their hijab, you make this sacrifice as long as Islam survives. Aba Abdullah teaches us that if they raise your head on a spear and they march your sister and your wives and your daughters behind your head on a spear, you give that sacrifice if it means the protection of the religion of Islam. We see the difficulties of Aba Abdullah as the lesson for us to learn, and for us to understand that through these lessons we learn about how our responsibilities to our faith and to our Lord are fulfilled.